So, America is going mad, or being driven mad, I think, by a number of factors. And we're getting into a situation where we have competing sets of truths being thrown at us. And, I ask myself, at what point does public accepted certainty become public truth? And, the best answer would be never. The opinion of, the public, has value, perhaps politically, but I don't think we should start making our decisions on, what is right and wrong based upon opinion when we have competing ideologies telling us different things. And people say, well, it's the truth, right? The truth is what's important. Well, okay, let's go with that for a moment. From my own perspective, truth is a malleable thing. Ideally, truth will be based in fact, but at one point it was a fact, and then therefore the truth that the world is flat, and that's not true. It was a truth that the sun and the universe revolved around the planet Earth, and we know that that is also not true. The facts impact truth. But then there's things like the truth that we tell one another, and that is something that has to be based in reality, in fact. But it's a little less tangible. And I want to take a moment to remind us all why a lie is so dangerous. I once took a course in college that it was a philosophy course, and we were caused to read a book by, I think her name was Cicely Bach, B-O-K, and it was all about lying. But the most important part of why it's wrong to lie is that when you lie, you lay claim to the truth. You take personal possession of it from the person that you lie to. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of the lies that I believe that we are being told, but I think that all of us know in one way or another that we are being exposed to lies as if it is the news, as if it is fact. And that's a dreadful thing. And I want to do a piece on expounding upon that theme later. But today, what we're going to be looking at is public perception of certain truths. And I want to start off by reminding us all of something that I think we know at a gut level, and that is that no mandate, no edict supersedes the law. It doesn't matter who it comes from. It doesn't matter if it comes from the president, the governor, your mayor. An edict or a mandate in this country does not supersede the law. And by the law, I mean the constitutions that are written for our nation and also for our states. So we're going to start with Judge Napolitano. Don't really like this guy, I'll be honest with you, but he has a lot of experience with the Constitution and law. And he was interviewed and had some things to say about mask mandates in particular. And I'm not going to go through the entire article, but I do want to point out a few salient parts. The concern was Joe Biden saying that he would mandate from a federal level the wearing of masks if the science said to do so. And the point is, no, you're not. You can't do that. And the reason for it is very simple. The federal government, this is quoting Napolitano now, the federal government certainly can't do it because federal government is not charged with public health or public safety. It is an area that is reserved by the 10th Amendment, which is the states' rights, for the Constitution of states. So for Joe Biden to stand up and say, you know, I can mandate these things. No, you can't. I think we all know that Joe says a lot of things which perhaps are not blue ribbon. But it goes on with some other comments. And talking about, so we have states that have mask mandates in varying degrees. I live in Texas, we still have one. Most of us go, you know, we don't care. But, you know, it's like, all right, whatever you want us to do. But then you have places like Florida, certain counties, and also the state of Michigan, where these, you know, little petty tyrants are flexing the might of their office. Well, carrying on, Judge Napolitano says to us, referring to the states, and that brings us to whether the states have authority to do that, enforce mask mandates, you know, out on the public, out on the streets. And the answer is, again, no. If a person is known to be contagious, the state could require that person to be quarantined or wear a mask. But anything short of that, the state cannot interfere with that person's freedom of movement or freedom to wear or not wear a mask. So the government's authority is really rather limited here, no matter how aggressive the pandemic may become. And that's kind of an interesting thing to keep in the back of your mind. You know, they say, well, you know, it's the law. No, it's not the law. He goes on to modify what he had to say a little bit, and he's talking more about enforcement. He says, the federal government could compel wearing masks on federal property, a military facility, the post office, government buildings. And the state government could compare wearing masks on state property, the DMV, state colleges, things like that. But on property the government does not own, the feds have no authority to compel wearing a mask, and the states can only compel it when people are sick. Which kind of begs the question, you know, what about other places? You know, it's like, well, you know, this store says that you can't go in there. Well, that might be policy, but it's not law. Anyway, then in terms of, again, of enforcement, he says, but in terms of police stopping you on the street and giving you a summons or a court imposing a fine, absolutely not. They don't have the authority to do that. Unless, of course, you're on state property, you're on federal property. First of all, these mayors and gubernatorial edicts are just suggestions. They are not law. And here's how you know that they're not law. This is me, not him. Did your state government, did your state legislature propose a bill, pass that bill, hand it over to the state Senate, and have it written into law, and was it signed by your governor? If the answer is no, it's not law. And even then, it will very likely be challenged the first time you ever are actually legitimately prosecuted for disobeying that law. Because again, it has to do with freedom of movement. You cannot be compelled to do this. And most of us know that. We know that intrinsically because, you know, we're Americans, we're free. But he does make a very interesting statement, which calls into question, how free are we? And he says that the force of public opinion could do what the law cannot do if the vast majority of people in an area shame those not wearing masks. You know, that's the colloquialism of the Karens, you know. I myself have heart disease and COPD and some other fun consequences of having lived a full and sometimes unwise life. I do not have to wear a mask. I cannot be compelled to do so. It is in fact unhealthy for me to do so. However, if I go out to a local store, yeah, I'll wear a mask. And it's not because I particularly give a damn. You know, if I'm not sick, I'm not worried about it. And I'm of an age to where if somebody else is sick, well, the mask isn't going to protect me. But the only reason that I wear it is because, again, it's just easier. And yes, that does make me a moral coward, and I'm working on, figuring out a better response other than blind acquiescence. But now that we've established the fact that, these things are not laws, and what we want to talk about today are things like duality of truths, and how about the duality of enforcement of law, equal application of law? We're going to get into that a little bit. Those of us that have kids, we know that getting them into school has been a major roadblock. There's all sorts of elements that get into it, the teachers' unions and their rules and so on and so forth, and of course the knee-jerk responses of needing to keep the children safe, despite the fact that children generally, don't have bad symptoms, and they're not really at risk. And there have been no cases of children passing the disease on to instructors. And if you're worried that that is going to be you, like if you're a 70-year-old English teacher, then yeah, maybe you should teach your course, remotely, if that can be set up, or maybe you should just retire or become an advisor. That's an unfair remark, and I would withdraw it if asked. But there are some really strange and stupid things going on. This is a story, maybe you've heard about it. It happened in the beginning of September, where you've got a high school student who actually got arrested for going to school. And, in a nutshell, it comes down to this Suffolk County, New York, of course it's New York, decides that, what we're going to do is we're going to essentially set up, on and off days for in class, not in class. It's kind of like gas rationing, except for, in-person learning. In-person learning has been demonstrated by brighter minds than mine to be the only truly effective way to instruct our kids. They're not getting it in remote. Maybe it's because there's other distractions. Maybe it's just a bad damned idea. But this kid, Maverick Stowe, love the name. He's a maverick. Okay. So he shows up for class when he's not supposed to. He gets suspended for 5 days. He goes back to class, and he's warned that if he returns, they'll give him a criminal trespass warning because you've been suspended for coming to school. He didn't come to school to be a BLM protester. He came to school to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, or whatever it is he's being taught. So he, of course, goes back, and the police arrest him for trespass. What law did he break? Oh, well, he's trespassing. Well, okay, so a school is private property, but it seems to me that if a kid wants to go to school to learn, he should be in school to learn. But the optics on this are just absolutely stupid. But the reason that I bring it to your attention is that the police participated in this stupidity. And that's really a problem, because the police are responsible for upholding law. At the core of this, there is no law. There is only basically a hysterical edict that provides power to petty dictators that they would not otherwise have. And it goes on. This is a really good one. I like this. So again, with the school, we have an individual who I want you to take a look. I can't show the video, but I want you to take a look and notice that this guy is not sitting near anybody. He's at least 6 feet from anyone else. And you remember social distancing? 6 feet, right? Okay. And he's not wearing a mask. Well, I watched this video, and you might want to watch it too. It's on YouTube, or it's, come here to the Argus Leader and find it. The police lay hands on him. He objects to that. Well, yes, that was stupid. You should not Don't resist if the police tell you that they're going to detain and arrest you for supporting a non-law, okay? Go with them and deal with it in the courts. That's the best way to do that. But he took exception to it. And these cops, this guy right here specifically, whips out a taser and threatens to tase him if he doesn't come quietly. So in other words, he's going to use what has been actually described in certain jurisdictions, technically a lethal form of defense, or offense in this case, against him because he's socially distanced but not wearing a mask. Again, it's not a law. Never was. And the police know it's not a law. And they are supporting this. Why? Good question. Maybe it has to do with the Karens. Maybe it has to do with, being afraid for your job. We're going to get back to that in a minute. My absolute favorite story, I love the optics on this. This is in Moscow, Idaho. In Moscow, Idaho, you can't go to church indoors. So they decide, mind you, you can do a whole lot of other things indoors, but you can't worship. You cannot practice your faith. So they are outside having, worship outside. And the police come and arrest 3 people while, by the way, singing hymnals. You really should see this. They're singing their hymns, but they're not wearing masks. It's like, okay, again, not a law, and you're singing, so why would you be wearing a mask? But you're not allowed to do that, and certainly not while worshiping in Moscow, Idaho, apparently. Not a law, but they arrest these people and charge them with what? Anyway, garbage. So these are terrible optics for the police. Okay, in a time when we actually need our police more than anything else, and we need to be able to show support for our police, the police are not doing what they should be doing. And it gets even better. This woman drove an hour and a half to go to her 8th grade son's outdoor football game. Please notice the paucity of people in the stands. She is socially distanced. Apparently somebody called the police. They come up, molest her for breaking a non-law, outside, socially distanced. And they tased her. Come to find out, one of the stories, I do not know the veracity of this, but apparently the woman has asthma. This would be a reason why you should not wear a mask. There are a lot of reasons to not wear a mask, not the least of which, just in case you're interested, you breathe in, you breathe out, you get moisture on the inside of the mask. It becomes harder to breathe. But it's also now a breeding ground for bacteria, which you will then breathe back in. Not a healthy thing, which is why I should not wear a mask. Anyway, so they tased this woman, dragged her off, and arrested her. Great optics, guys. Awesome. And, maybe you look at this and maybe you say, yeah, but, maybe the county or the state has a law on the books which says that if the governor, says something on, because of health and safety, that can be enforced through law. Well, maybe it can. I suggest you get yourself arrested and get yourself a constitutional lawyer and sue if that happens. But it's still ridiculous because at its core is not a law. Anyway, but I think we all know the story of the McCloskeys, right? The McCloskeys had unwanted visitors in large numbers go traipsing down their private road, shouting unpleasant things and making threats against their lives, their home, their dog. Yeah, these are great people. But in any event, they came out. Mr. McCloskey had an AR-15 style long gun, and Mrs. McCloskey had a prop of a gun. The weapon actually was not capable of being fired. It had been rendered inoperable and certified such so that it could be used inside a courtroom for a case that they were doing. Now, they actually didn't do anything wrong, according to the Castle Doctrine. And the AG for the state moved to dismiss the charges of the George Soros paid for county district attorney, who was just basically, rabid to get these people into prison for having the temerity to defend themselves in America. More on that later. But what I want to draw your attention to, he goes through this brief, he goes through the Castle Doctrine, he goes through the whole thing. And this is essentially his summation. And I'm going to go ahead and read it verbatim for us. Missouri's Castle Doctrine thus makes several principles clear under section blah, blah, blah. Missouri citizen has no duty to retreat from his or her front porch or lawn area, even if an unruly crowd of trespassers is passing in front of his or her house. The next subsection under section blah, 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 part 1, a Missouri citizen may use physical force, including the display of weapons as a deterrent. By the way, that's when it goes into parentheticals, he's just, I think, addressing the charges that were actually made, which were ridiculous. But if that citizen reasonably believes that another person is contemplating the imminent use of unlawful force. Another subsection, thus, if Missouri citizens receive threats of violence from others, which they did, they may display weapons to protect themselves. This is especially true if those threats come from intruders who are already trespassing on private property, and at least one of whom is carrying an assault rifle. Under a different subsection, it says a Missouri citizen may even use deadly force against someone who is both threatening unlawful force against another person and trespassing on private property at the same time. Further states, thus, if an angry intruder invades private property and threatens to harm the homeowner or another person, a Missouri citizen may defend him or herself, even if it may require the use of deadly force. Finally, under section 571, etc., self-defense is not merely an affirmative defense to charges under this statute. Further modified to display firearms in self-defense as defined in the previous section is not a crime, and it should not be charged as a crime in the first place. So the gist of it is, Missouri's Castle Doctrine is very broad, very far-reaching, and it's meant to protect citizens and to let, specifically, it was written for minorities and people who are impoverished to not be afraid to protect their lives and property. And it was written to be very strongly in protection of your rights to bear arms and use them if necessary. So this is the law. This is the top cop in the state outlining the law. So let me ask you something. Why did this happen? See these officers here? These officers came onto the McCloskey's property and confiscated their weapons. The reason that this really pisses me off is that these officers take an oath of service. They have to uphold the Constitution and the state and city laws, okay? They know the law. You can absolutely bet that they know the law. They carry a little booklet which has the laws in it. So they knew that they were not within the law when they confiscated these weapons from innocent citizens. And why did they do it? Well, they were told to do it. That's not good enough. That's not good enough by a far stretch. Other people in other times have been told to do horrendous things, and they did them. They knew they were wrong. These officers knew what they did was wrong. But why? Why did they do it? Well, they were told to do it. And maybe, again, it had something to do with this force of public opinion being able to do things that the law cannot do. BLM were tearing the hell out of St. Louis. Burned down, riots, deaths. So what happens? Well, you get a corrupt DA filing bogus charges. And if you followed the case, you also know that she caused her forensic team to manipulate evidence vis-a-vis. They made the gun that Mrs. McCloskey was waving around able to fire again in order to substantiate and support her bogus charges. Again, these officers knew the law. These officers knew the law. These officers knew the law. Are we starting to, get a picture here? So what, right? Public opinion, it'll all come out in the wash. This is an interesting story. And I want you to note where this is from. This is from heavy.com, okay? Jake Gardner was an Omaha bar owner, and as you can read, shot somebody, and the DA says it's clearly self-defense. What happened was he and his father were at the bar that Jake owned, and the rioters came by, and his father went out to, talk to them, confront them, whatever. Not the brightest thing to do, perhaps. And they pushed his father to the ground. Jake came out, said, "Oh, no, you don't either." Told them all to back the hell off, right? And, they kind of menaced him. He lifted his shirt. He was apparently using an appendix carry, and he showed that he's armed. He's saying, don't do this. Well, two guys jumped him, got him to the ground, pummeled on him. He pulls his gun, fires 2 warning shots into the air. Well, the guys that were on him decided, well, I don't want to play ball with this. Now, you have to understand that he's still on the ground on all fours, trying to get his bearings and get his ass back up. By the way, when you fire a gun and you're not wearing ear protection, it's going to rattle you. I don't care if it's in your own hands, it's loud. So anyway, he'd been beaten, had a large noise right next to his ears. And so he's trying to get himself back up when this James Scurlock jumps on him from behind, gets him into a chokehold for apparently something like 18 seconds. He's choking him out. And so Jake Gardner puts gun back, fires. Shot the man, killed him. Okay, fine. This is all caught on video. So what happened? Free to go. Not going to file charges. The force of public opinion can do what law cannot do. Well, a couple of things happened. One, the company that held the rent, whatever, lease for his bar, canceled the lease, told him to get out. His landlord, afraid for repercussions, etc., canceled his lease. He had to get out. Lost his business, lost his home. Fine, all right. And then the DA, because of community voices, right? Community voices is how it was termed. Ends up going and getting a grand jury indictment for manslaughter. for him protecting himself. He lost his business. He lost his home. They were going to have him lose his freedom. Bear in mind, this man here is a war veteran. Okay? Took his life. Took his own life rather than, lose the only thing that he had, which was his freedom. Now, I'm not a big fan of suicide. I don't think it solves anything. I think it creates more problems. And I don't want anybody to kill himself. But why did this happen? Was it lawful? I don't think so. And I don't think that anybody who thinks through the evidence and the reasons that were stated for him being indicted would think that it is lawful either. So I have to ask, who are we becoming? Why are we becoming this way? And what might be the fallout? Now, people have pointed to a quote by John Adams that I pulled up, and I want to read the entire paragraph that quote came from. And you'll recognize it, I'm sure, when we get to the end. And this isn't a letter that he wrote, but it had to do, it doesn't really matter. This is what it says. While our country remains untainted with the principles and manners which are now producing desolation in so many parts of the world, while she continues sincere and incapable of insidious and impious policy, we shall have the strongest reason to rejoice in the local destination assigned us by Providence. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation toward one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation, while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance, and displays in the most captivating manner the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity, while it is rioting in rapine and insolence, this country will become the most miserable habitation in the world. Because we have no government armed with the power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion, avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry, would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Interesting. So, while we remain a godly people, a moral people, our Constitution will help to guide us, to keep us on the path. But we're in trouble. And I want to leave you with a story, because you'll notice that I was hitting fairly hard on police activities. And I want to say that I honor the police. I am grateful for the police. We need police. We need brave men and women who uphold the laws of godly and moral people. But there's a problem, and there's work that needs to be done. But the story I want to tell you is about St. Augustine, and it illustrates what I'm going to say at the end. St. Augustine received a letter from the Jesuits that were operating in South America when they were trying to bring Christendom to the heathens and pagans in the jungles. And at the time, there was a Holy Mother-centric pagan religion that the people identified with. And so when they heard the story of Mary, the mother of Christ, they essentially transposed their religious feelings onto the mother of Christ, and therefore were willing to accept Christianity because they saw her as the same deity that they had been worshiping anyway. And the missionaries were concerned because they didn't think that the natives accepting Christendom were understanding, they were not in full knowledge of what they were accepting. And so they asked Augustine, they said, is it all right to let these people continue to believe as they believe, provided they embrace Christendom? And Augustine sent back a letter, but it comes down to this. You cannot tell a lie in service of the truth. And so I say to you and to our police officers in the field, you cannot break the law in its service. Do better.